maybe begin with a customary chant, which is a tradition. These chants come from the Upanishads, which is called Vedanta, and usually prefixed and affixed to every spiritual discourse. This chant is from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad and is traditionally used for saluting the Guru or the Master at the time of the sannyasa ceremony. So this is a secret which I'm revealing to you. Because some point of time all of you will take sannyas, if not now, years hence. It simply means you give up all attachments and completely surrender to the feet of God. In the language of bhakti, in the language of jnana or knowledge, it means you completely become devoid of all desires and merge in that infinite reality. Om yo brahmanam vidadhati purvam yo vai vedanscha prahinoti tasmai tam hadevam atma buddhi prakasham mumukshur vai sharanamaham prapadye nishkalam nishkriyam shantam niravadyam niranjanam amritasya param setum dagdhendhanamivanalam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. I take refuge in that infinite Brahman, desiring immortality, being a seeker of truth, that Brahman who projected Hiranyagarbha, the great creator God in the beginning, handed over the Vedas to him, and who is shining and who is the bridge to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. So the topic this morning is rather scary to most of us. How to die peacefully and happily. There is a movement in the West and the East. They call it aging gracefully. Ever heard of this? This is very popular in India. Everybody has to age, whether we wish it or not. We are aging every moment, which is movement in time. The two great mysteries, space and time, have been addressed by scientists as well as spiritualists, by all religious groups, all philosophical groups across countries, across ages, trying to understand what is the mystery of time and the mystery of space. The turn of the 19th century, as you know, Einstein unraveled the mystery of space and time through what he called this general and the special theories of relativity, 1905, 1915, where he completely revolutionized our concepts of space and time. It was thought that objects are in space and we move in time. Einstein said space and time are not two separate entities, but you should talk about space-time continuum. Rather than talking about an object located in space, described by three coordinates. You know them X, Y, and Z. We call it forward and backward, left and right, upward and downward. Every particle every point can be located in space by the three coordinates. But this point or an object is not only in space, it's also in time. You can move in space from one position to another, but even if you don't move in space, you are moving in time. You sit in a place, don't move at all, but after a few years, people will come and say, oh, you have grown old. That means you have been moving in time, whether you liked it or not. In space, you have a choice to move or not to move, but you have no choice in time. You need to be moving in time, and fortunately or unfortunately, forward and not backward. Those of you who have read the H.G. Wells's famous novel, Time Machine, it is also filmed, in which he conceived of a time machine which can take you backward in time. The wonder of time is that it moves only in one direction and not the other way, whereas in space you can move backward and forward. A reverse gear is possible in space, but not in time. You can't go back in time. Although science fantasies have conceived of movement backward in time, and in theoretical physics also, people have talked about how time can move backward. Whether the universe will look exactly the same if you reverse time. These questions have been asked, called time reversal. So there are famous theorems which say, if all the charged particles reverse their charges, positive becomes negative, negative becomes positive, and if all the left and right symmetry is changed, that means left becomes right and right becomes left, and time is reversed, then will the universe look the same thing? The answer which is given is yes. This is called the famous CPT Theorem, charge conjugation, parity, and time reversal. So these are great mysteries which have been addressed repeatedly by science as well as philosophy and religion. We wish we could go backward in time, but we can't. So what is time? What you call death is the end of time as far as this particular life is concerned. In Hinduism, as you know, we believe in reincarnation. Unlike in some other religions, we believe after you die, you will be born again. And when you are born again, you will die, you go back and forth. Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani jathare shayanam, yah samsare khanudustare, kripaya pare pahi murare, bhaja govindam, govindam bhaja mudhamate. A famous song composed by the great commentator Shankaracharya in a very simple language. Oh Lord, oh stupid mind, call on the Lord again and again. Because you'll be, when you are born in the mother's womb, you pass through a series of incidents in life. At the end of it, you die. Again, you come back to the mother's womb. Again, you die. How many times are you going to come back and forth? This samsara, the transmigration as we call it, is terrible. Put an end to this. So what is the way? Call on God and take refuge in Him and His grace. So we believe there are several births you go back and forth, and our scriptures have been paying great encomium to human birth, maybe by a word of encouragement. And you know, in Hinduism, we liberally sprinkle zeros after 1. 100,000, 1 billion. We pass through several billions of lives, they say, before you can acquire the human birth. Just to show this is very precious, and don't waste this human life in eating and drinking and sleeping and socializing and moving around. This is too precious to be wasted, and time is just running out. When you have the energy, when you have the youth, when you have the capacity, when you have the inclination to call on God, quickly do it. So we are blessed, therefore, that we have the human birth. And every religion talks about human beings as the pinnacle of glory. In Christianity, as you know, God created man in His own image and asked all the angels to bow down before man. You know, there's the story of the Old Testament. And an angel called Lucifer refused to obey God's command. We are angels. How can we bow down before man? He stood up, immediately called all the other angels, and started an agitation. Angels' union was started at heavens. And you know the opening sentences? This is the Milton's Paradise Lost. And Swami Vivekananda was so well read in many of these texts of English literature, having been taught by the English and Scottish professors, the first sentence of Satan's speech in heaven, "Arise, awake, or be ever fallen." Swami Vivekananda must have been so deeply influenced when he translated the famous statement in the Kathopanishad, "Uttishtata Jagrata," he used these very words of Satan, "Arise, awake." So which means man is considered, man includes woman of course, human being is considered the pinnacle of God's glorious creation. Why? Sri Ramakrishna explains this in the Gospel of Ramakrishna when he says, man alone has the capacity to imagine and think of the infinite. The elephant is such a huge species, but it can't think of the infinite. Man has the capacity to conceive the infinite in whatever form, which shows that man's nature is infinite. Because if you did not have infinity as a part of your own nature, you wouldn't be able to conceive of infinity. Every one of us has some idea of infinity, although we can't exactly say what it is. We can't define it, we can't explain it, we can't describe it. But we think of infinity as something extremely vast, big, inconceivable. If it is inconceivable, why do you think of infinity at all? That means man's nature, on the one hand, is finite, on the other hand, is infinite. It is a peculiar combination of the finite and the infinite. All of you will do well to study a famous lecture by Swami Vivekananda in the complete works of Vivekananda called The Open Secret. Swami Vivekananda is very fond of giving catchy titles, which we are following now. If I did not say The Art of Dying, I wouldn't have had so much of crowd. It's Vedanta once again. Swami just said, the open secret. There is nothing secret about it. It is only Vedanta. Where he says, if you take up anything in this universe, be it a grain of sand, be it a small flower, and analyze it, probe into it, investigate into it deeply enough, you will find it end up with infinity. That means behind the name and the form which every one of these things have in this universe, you have an infinite background of which this name and form are only manifestations in space-time. This is the Vedantic position. Now, having got this precious human life, Sri Ramakrishna says, it will be a terrible disaster if you do not realize God in this very life. Ramakrishna has 4 aphorisms, we call them Chatursutri. Aphorisms are pithy statements in Sanskrit in which spiritual truths are couched so that you can remember, memorize, repeat, and meditate upon them. Sutra literature, aphoristic literature, is very famous in Sanskrit. You have the Brahma Sutras, you have the Vedanta, they are called Vedanta Sutras, you have the Naradiya Bhakti Sutras, you have the Karma Sutras, and so on. So the 4 sutras of Sri Ramakrishna is God is, first sutra. Second, He can be seen and realized. Third sutra, to realize God and to see Him is the purpose of this human life. Fourth sutra, having got this precious human life, it will be a terrible disaster if you do not realize God in this very life. Sense of urgency is brought to you. So having got this precious human life, we have to find out what is the true nature about ourselves. Many people say, you monks usually frighten us into religion. You create a crisis, you frighten us, time is running out. Come on. What is the urgency? I'm very happy now. If you are happy enough, please go ahead. Vedanta has not begun for you. But a time will come in your life, or a time comes in everybody's life, off and on, when you feel intensely unhappy for no reason. You do not exactly know why, but you have to ask certain fundamental questions. Being rational, thinking human beings, you have to ask these questions. When people talk to me about being overmuch religiously inclined to be asking fundamental questions, I retort to them, why do scientists ask fundamental questions about life, about particles? 10,000 scientists came together in CERN in Europe, the Large Hadron Collider, to find out the origin of the universe, or the Big Bang, and whether a peculiar particle which was called the God particle later on really existed. It has nothing to do with God. You know the story of the God particle? This particle was predicted by Higgs. When we were students researching in theoretical physics, this particle was predicted in the 70s. What is the reason for which every particle in the universe has mass? A massive particle. So Higgs said there is a particle later on called the Higgs particle, which provides mass to every particle. So they were trying and trying. They could not experimentally detect this Higgs boson. And somebody wrote a paper in a journal, "Goddamn particle, you can't detect it." And the editor of the magazine thought, damn is not a good word to be published. So he edited only that portion and removed the damn, it became God particle. So 10,000 scientists spending billions of euros coming together and experimenting on the Large Hadron Collider to find out the origin of the universe, whether a certain particle existed. Isn't it a luxury? Isn't it madness? What is the purpose? You say, I am going to go holidaying. I am going to climb this mountain. I am going to have an adventure. Why do people go for adventures? You are very happy at home. And you take so much of trouble in scaling mountain peaks and rock climbing. That's an adventure. Squirrels and rats do it much faster than you can. Why do you imitate a rat? But there is an adventurous spirit in man. It wants to do something which is very unusual, to conquer nature. Nature says you are limited, you can't climb this rock. Man says, I can, I will find out a way to climb. That means constantly you want to conquer your lower nature to be able to climb to higher scales of nature, and even risking his or her own life. How many people have died? Astronauts have died in space missions. We glorify them because they were adventurous to enter into space and to probe into the mystery. What's happening in Mars? And the various planets are such puny objects in the vast galaxy. The sun, around which our Earth is rotating, is a very, very poor, mediocre star in the galaxy. There are hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy. There are hundreds of billions of galaxies which are moving very fast, the expanding universe. And many of the stars are coming to being and dying every moment. And the light from the star reaches us, the star is dead already. So in this vast, mysterious universe, you exist as a human being, and you necessarily have to ask certain very, very fundamental questions about yourself. Where you came from, where you go, what is the destiny? Is the death the end of all? Somebody described a human being in a very funny way, just to show how small, how silly, how humble we are with the great arrogance which we possess. Shakespeare said, the measure for measure. Swami Ranganathanji was very fond of quoting this. We memorized it by listening to him constantly. Is that man, proud man, ignorant of what he is most sure of his glassy essence, like an angry ape, makes such fantastic gestures before the high heavens, which makes the angels weep. So what is man? A pessimist described man as follows. A human being is a conglomeration of carbon atoms crawling pathetically in the grain of cosmic dust which is called the earth. That's what we are. But we also have a divine essence which can comprehend the universe, which can probe into the mysteries of the universe, and ask certain fundamental questions about the infinity of life. When you ask these questions, you ask yourself, I am born at a particular moment. and everybody rejoices. I have a child. In India, we have male children where everybody is very happy, and we rejoice, we distribute sweets. This is one example of how nobody can be a materialist. I always use this argument. We say we are all materialists. Who is a materialist? He is fond of matter, fond of wealth, a miserly person who will not spend wealth. But the child is born, we rejoice, knowing full well that the child is going to have a liability for the next 25 years. And is going to make you spend several $1 million on his education and his growth and the health. But why do you rejoice if you're a true materialist? You are not. Nobody can be really a materialist. There's a combination of spirituality and materialism in everybody. Another example of how materialism cannot be the end-all and be-all of life. Who is a materialist? A materialist is a person who thinks matter is supreme. I am great because I own so many cars. I have a vast estate. I have so much money in my bank. I am so powerful. So I feel greatness consists in my possessing many material things. Recently we heard that a small pen, a broken pen, was auctioned in England for several million pounds. Einstein's letter recently was discovered and was auctioned for several $1 million. What does that mean? This letter, this broken pen, and a stick which is preserved at Belur Math every day worshipped, whose material cost is not even $1, is being considered the most invaluable treasure because Swami Vivekananda touched it and walked with that. This pen was used by Shakespeare when he wrote the Hamlet, and the letter was written by Einstein. So the spirit called Einstein, the spirit called Vivekananda, the spirit called Shakespeare touches a piece of matter whose material worth is nothing, and therefore this matter becomes infinitely valuable. This is spirituality, and all of us buy it. So which means spirituality and materialism coexist in every human being on this earth. Now, we ask certain fundamental questions about what is life and what is death. What is life has been asked by science, biological sciences, without coming to any definite conclusion. We do not exactly know what is life. And the famous experiments performed by Jagadish Chandra Bose from India, in which he asked, is there a line of demarcation between life and non-life? Where does life begin and where does matter end? So he made some fantastic experiments which are revived now. So he found that the line of demarcation between life and non-life is not very clear. It's very fuzzy. Where matter ends and where life begins is very difficult to say. So beyond life, our ancient seers discovered there's a consciousness. In all religions they have discovered, the mystics of Christianity and Islam and across all religions they have said, there's a consciousness which goes beyond matter and life. So space, time and matter form a continuum, as Einstein proved in his general and the special theories of relativity. And in India, our rishis added space, time, matter, consciousness form a continuum. You add one more dimension. You don't reject matter as unreal, as extreme Advaitis will do, and you don't swear by matter as only reality, as materialists will do, but you say space, time, matter, consciousness form one indivisible, infinite continuum. And in this continuum, you are moving in time. When you are born, time t equal to 0. You keep moving, time t equal to 10 years, 15 years, you grow up. And you a small kid, you was just 3 feet. Now he has grown to 5 feet. You go on, 25 years, he's become a 6-footer. But you don't expect him to be the 8-footer and 10-footer. So this was analyzed in ancient India. This is called bhava vikara. Vikara means transformation, changes. So the bhava, existence, constantly changes. At time t equal to 0, you are born. It's called jayate in Sanskrit. Jayate, just being born. What happens thereafter? You grow, vardhate, growing. Then you stagnate for some time. You neither grow nor you decay. That's called asti. You stay put for some time. The third transformation. And the fourth is viparinamate. There is a small change in you. Changes take place. Your hair grows grey. Your teeth keep falling down. Viparinamate, changes take place in your body and in your mind also. The kind of concepts which you are holding very dear to yourself when you are young, those concepts no longer exist. You cried and cried when your balloon burst, when you blew it too hard, and your mom says, don't bother about it. You said, you can't tell me that, I want a new one. When you grow up, you laugh at it, saying that's so silly of me. Your ideas keep changing. So viparinamate, then comes apakshiyate, you decay, and finally comes time t equal to 80 years, 90 years. How long? How long do we want to live? 100? Then comes death. So there is a continuity from jayate, from being born, to mriyate, to dying. Now this has to be accepted by anybody who is born. You can't wish it away. Although people may say, please don't talk about it, it will come when it comes. But are you willing and getting prepared to face it? There is a famous shloka, a verse by Tulasidasa, one of our great poets, who wrote the famous Ramayana. He says, oh, Tulasi is addressing his own mind. When you came in this universe, when you were born, everybody was laughing and rejoicing, and you came into the world crying. You know, every baby cries at the time of birth, whether it's American baby or Indian baby or French baby. And the doctors say, if the baby didn't cry, there is something wrong with it. They give it special injection to make it cry. He's going to cry the whole life, but the doctors insist that it is a cry at the time of birth. And you know what is the cry? Across religions, across centuries, across regions, across countries. Kwa, 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 kwa. Kwa in Sanskrit means where, kutra. The baby is asking as it were, where have I come? Where was I? Where from I have come? Kwa. And then it grows up. And Tulasi says, when you came into the world, everybody rejoiced and laughed and you cried. Live in such a way, when you leave this world at the time of death, you go laughing and everybody cries for you. Let not people say, that man is gone. Let people not rejoice at your exit. Oh, what a wonderful man is gone. So you go laughing. You are so happy, you have lived a life of fulfillment, you have lived a life of sacrifice, you have lived a life of spirituality, you have lived a life not for yourself but for others. With great joy and fulfillment, you kick this frame. That's why in English they call kicking the bucket. It's a slang word for death. That means this bucket, this small case in which you are encased, you kick it and walk away. In Sanskrit, we call it the torn clothes. The Gita talks about clothes which are torn, no longer usable. Just like you reject these old clothes and take on new clothes, the self of man, which is called the Atman, the Jiva-Atman, rejects old clothes and takes on newer and newer clothes. So when somebody dies, you rejoice. Not because he was a bad man, he's maybe an extraordinary person, but because he is going to get a new pair of clothes. You know, my grandfather died yesterday. We were laughing at that. He had a 1930 model car. It's no longer usable. Now he is going to get 2019 model car, the latest model. So you are going to get a new body. Again you go on. How long and how much? A time comes when you feel tired. So Vedanta says, you live in such a way that you will be able to die happily and peacefully. The science of life has been discussed, debated, investigated into by biological sciences. But the art of dying has been investigated by Vedanta. Swami Vivekananda, when he was in America, was challenged by a person very sarcastically. He said, your religion, that means the Hindu religion Vedanta, doesn't help man to live. Because it's too otherworldly, always talking about God, which is not very useful for this world. Your religion doesn't help man to live. Swamiji immediately retorted, but it helps him to die. That was my inspiration in talking about this. Swamiji, as you know, was a very good in repartee and retorts. Instantly he used to go in repart. Somebody asked him, what is the difference between a babu and a baboon? You know, babu means a gentleman. Baboon is a monkey. That person who was asking was from Scotland. Swamiji knew it. Oh, not much. Just the difference of a letter. The difference between a sot and a Scot. The Scot is a Scot person and a sot is a scoundrel. So it helps him to die. That's a very, very profound statement. In India, in the Hindu religion and the Sanatana Dharma and Vedanta, whole of life is a grand preparation for death. Not that we're unhappy to die, but every moment we are dying. Are we aware of that? If you read biological sciences, physiology for example, it will tell you all the cells in the body are continuously dying. They say every 10 or 12 years, your entire body is remade. You have a new body. You don't feel that. Suppose you say, I'll give you a very funny proposition. A mother was crying bitterly. Why? My baby is slowly growing up and is now a child, now become an adult. What of that? The child is dying and the adult is being born. When the adult dies, an old man is born, and therefore when the old man is dying, why should he weep? The Bhagavad Gita. Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dehantara praptir dhiras tatra namuhyati. Just like in the body, you have youth, and youth dies and adult is born. The adult dies and the old man is born. So when the old man dies, why should he weep? So if you analyze yourself through means of science, you will realize that every moment you are dying. Your body every moment is decaying, and constantly there is a replenishment and there is a reformation of all the cells in your body. It's a continuous rejuvenation. Suppose you say, can you give me a glass of water? They will say, oh, I didn't ask for that. It's a drama. Can you give me a glass of water? You bring water. Oh, it's 2 days old. Oh, I want some fresh water. We want something always fresh. It's preserved somewhere and brought to show that it is fresh, but you don't mind it. In your presence, it will be fresh. Nobody wants something which is old, something which is very tasty, but it should be freshly cooked. But do you know there is something inside our body which is not fresh, which is constantly circulating in the body from the time you are born in the mother's womb till the time you will be put in the funeral pyre and burnt away or buried in the grave. That liquid is constantly circulating in your body, not at all fresh. That is called the blood. Blood is circulating in our body constantly, continuously. It's an old blood. Nobody says, I don't want old blood. Give me new blood. Transfusion of blood may kill you also. So we are very happy with the old blood continuously circulated. That means that it's getting rejuvenated every moment. I'm not trying to teach you biology, but it's constantly being purified by oxygen. The oxygen which we take in and the carbon dioxide which we reject. The arteries and the veins carry the pure and the impure blood. And the heart is pumping constantly. The lungs are responsible for taking in the oxygen. You know the whole mechanism. So which means there is a rejuvenation continuously taking place. The deaths of the old blood and the births of the new blood through a process of rejuvenation, which is nature's way of purifying you constantly. See, if you deeply analyze your own body, leave alone the mind and the spirit and spirituality and all that, just look at your own body. You are dying every moment. And every moment that you are being reborn, but you say, I constantly. When your cells die and you get completely a new body after about 10 years, 12 years according to biology, you don't feel I have God. You feel I am there. The I continues. The continuity of the I is a mystery which Vedanta is trying to address. Who is this I which continues to exist in spite of all the changes that are taking place in the body and the mind? The problem of identity is a great one in philosophy. Interesting joke about this is the following. The axe by which the trees are cut. A woodcutter had an axe and he said, I am using the same axe for past 10 years. Only I have changed the blade 10 times and the handle 12 times. It is the same axe. It is exactly with the body and the mind. In spite of continuous changes which are constantly taking place, you have a feeling. You have an undeniable, deep conviction you are there the same person. So this I which informs you about all the changes, constantly watching these changes at the same time feeling I am unchanging, in its essence is called the Atman, that is Vedanta. It is very simple, it is not mysterious, it is not mystical. It is simply a profound answer to simple questions that you ask. Who is the I which constantly seeing the changes always feels that I am changeless? If everything is changing, then life will have no meaning. People ask, what is the need of God? God, of course, is not necessary if you wouldn't mind becoming mad. Nobody wants to become mad. Who is a mad person? A person who doesn't find meaning in life. Nothing actually has meaning. Then you become mad or you commit suicide. If everything in the world is constantly changing, life will lose all its meaning. You think of this. You go back home and you find the home is not there. What happened to my home? Oh, it was here just half an hour ago. It moved over to Florida yesterday. Everything constantly changes, but there is something which is unchanging within this change, so that change can become meaningful. Change gets its meaning through changelessness, an unchanging entity. It is not a conception, it is not a belief, it is not a conviction, it is not an imagination. It is the necessity compelled by pursuit of truth. It has to be there so that everything has meaning. Sri Ramakrishna gives a beautiful example in his gospel. I'll give this example in my own way, adding a little masala to it. We have a university, as you know, and I need some funds. Somebody tells me, you come to me tomorrow, I'll give you some funds. So I go there with great expectation, how much he's going to give me. He takes his checkbook, and I'm peeping to see how much he writes there. He puts a 0, another 0, a third 0, and the fourth 0 I become irritated. Are you kidding? Why did you call me? He smiles, puts a 1 before that. I said, sir, please add some more zeros. So Sri Ramakrishna says, all the zeros add up to 0, but the 1 before the 0 gives value to all the zeros. This 1 is God, the unchangeable entity, the Atman of Vedanta, and the zeros are all the things in the world. Are the zeros valueless? No, they have value, but they do not have value without the 1 before them. So unchanging substance is necessary to give meaning to change. There is a funny story about a professor, an American mathematical professor. He is a very great mathematician, Professor Wiener. The story is very funny. You have heard of professorial absent-mindedness. Most of the professors are supposed to be very absent-minded, absorbed in thought. This professor is particularly absent-minded because he is constantly absorbed in solving problems. They had changed homes, so his wife told him, see, Wiener, we have changed homes. This is the new address. This is the new telephone number. Don't drive back to the old home. I know. Why do you tell me repeatedly? He put it in his pocket. He goes to his office. Suddenly a problem strikes him. Frantically looking for a piece of paper, he saw one in his pocket, scribbled something in the back for a long time, and found that the problem wouldn't work. In desperation, he threw the paper in the bin, and in the evening, as usual, he drove to his old home, only to remember what his wife told him. But the address is in my pocket. Where is the slip? Gone. Then a bright idea came to him, being a professor. A small girl was standing there. See, Professor Wiener is very famous. So anybody should be able to tell me where he has moved. He went to the small kid. My dear, can you tell me where Professor Wiener has moved? Dad, Mom kept me here. She knew that you will forget. His daughter was interviewed by the television several years later and asked whether the story is true. She blushed and said, oh, the dad was not that forgetful. So if constantly things change, everything changes, life will have no meaning. There has to be something which is changeless. And that changeless, what is change? Change takes place in space and in time. Is there any other possibility? I was in Calcutta, I was in India, I moved over to Hollywood. From Hollywood Center I came to Santa Barbara. I'm moving in space. I'm changing my position in space from one point to another. We are constantly moving in time. Change always takes place in space and in time, and therefore causality. Causation is related to timing. It's a sequence of timing from the past through the present into the future. The past is the cause, the present is the effect. The present becomes the cause and the future becomes the effect. Why didn't you come for the lecture? Oh, I had a bad cold. Got drenched in the rain. I'm feeling feverish. Yesterday, so I couldn't come. Oh, be careful. Did you take medicines? This is a valid conversation. Why did you not come? Tomorrow, there's a prediction of great rain. I'm going to drench in the drain tomorrow, so I can't come today. How do you look at that? It's meaningless because the cause has to precede the effect. So there's a sequence of timing in causality. So space, time, and causation go together. Any change is in space, time, and causation. And therefore, anything which is changeless has to be beyond space, beyond time, and not restricted or bound by causality. If you go that far, I'm going to nail you now. So Vedanta is so scientific. When you see changelessness means there is no space, time, and causation, what happens? that which is beyond space, time and causation has to be infinite. Will you take that? Why? Because if it is beyond space and time, it has to be infinite, because anything which in space-time is finite. Finitude means it is restricted by space and restricted by time. This room has finite space because restricted by the four walls. This lecture is finite because restricted by a time limit of 1 hour. I know I'm ending my time. So anything in space and time which is change is restricted and therefore finite. On the contrary, anything which is beyond space and time and causation has to be infinite. Do we agree that far? Little more. If it is infinite, it has to be one. Why? If it is two, there will be two infinities. And as Vivekananda says, if there are two infinities, one will impinge upon the other, both will become finite. There can't be two infinities, infinity has to be one. A little more. If the infinity is one, it has to be me. Why? If there is something apart from me which is infinite, there will be two infinities which is not acceptable. And therefore, I am that infinite self, aham brahmasmi. This is the rationale behind the great Mahavakya, the great saying that I am that infinite self. The Guru, the Master, tells the disciple, Tattvamasi, you are that infinite existence, consciousness, bliss. You are that infinite self. And the disciple immediately realizes, aham brahmasmi, I am that infinite self. What happens then? What happens is you become deathless. Not that you become deathless, you were deathless as an entity which is beyond space-time causation, and now you realize your deathless nature. Who dies? A person who was born, he dies. Who was born? Swami Prabhavanandaji in one lecture very funnily says, Naja said God is dead. Prabhavanandaji says, you may say God is dead, but I ask, when was he ever born? So he who is born, he dies. Who was born? This body? This body is dead, dull. This mind, which is also a product of matter. The spirit, which is not born in time or space. So who is that is born? So before you think of death, think of birth, think of living. The person who is born in Vedanta is called Jivatma. Jivatma is a peculiar combination of the body and the mind and the spirit. He is not the pure spirit who can neither be born nor die. He is not pure matter whose birth and death are inconsequential. He is a peculiar combination of consciousness and the unconscious, what we call Chaitanya and Jada. It's called Chit Jada Granthi. It's a knot, K-N-O-T, not N-O-T. It is a knot between Chit and Jada, consciousness and the unconscious. Chit Jada Granthi gives rise to the sense of I, Jivatma. So Vedanta analyzed and found out when we say I, what is meant is the Jivatma, the I, which caught in this snare of body, mind and intellect, thinks he is a small limited entity. The whole purpose is to release this Jivatman from the snare in which he is caught up and the jail in which he is ensnared, trapped, and to release him from this, which means death. Death is of the body and the mind and the feeling that you are small Jivatman. When you die to the feeling that you are a small limited entity, you are born in eternal bliss. and the eternal infinite consciousness. Christ said this, didn't he? When you can die to this life, then you get eternal life. The water of life which is given to Christ in the famous parable. The waters of life are the waters of divine consciousness which is given to everybody. And Vedanta invites everybody. The Vedanta societies in America, in England, in France, in India, all over the world, there are invitations to all of you to sip this nectar of immortality and realize that you are the deathless entity, although imagining that you are going to die. So little Jivatman dies. Doesn't it happen to you every day? Think of your sleep. You come back home terribly tired. I am so tired, I have to sleep now. What happens in sleep? Your individuality is suspended for the moment. Not that it goes away, you come back again. Your individuality as the I goes away. No desires, no commitments, no cell phones. You are temporarily suspended and you feel great joy. That means when the individuality is lost, there is great joy because you enter into infinity, but only temporarily. Again you come back to the world of cell phones and credit cards and commitments, go through the whole rigmarole to get again tired and go to sleep. The sleep is a great phenomenon which Vedanta repeatedly has emphasized in an example of how suspension of the individuality of the Jivatman gives you enormous joy. A joy which is limitless. You come back and say, I slept so well, I didn't know anything, and I felt great joy. Sukham asvapsam na kinchit avedisham. I slept so well, I felt great joy, I did not know anything. So two experiences come to you in deep sleep. One is the experience of not knowing anything, experience of ignorance, and experience of joy. Vedanta asks the question, who experienced these two? I was not there at that time. So there must have been some fellow looking there at that time, not participating in either dream or sleep or the waking state, but looking on and recording all this. If you can catch that fellow and then identify with that Sakshi, which is witness, then I have attained the realization of the supreme truth. In the waking state, the ego plays as the waking ego. All of you are sitting and listening to me. I am talking to you. This is the waking ego. We call it I1 or IW. Then I go and dream. Then the entire new world opens up before me. I conjure up so many things which I have imagined perhaps during waking state. A completely new world in which I move around. That's called the I which is playing there is called the dream ego, ID or I2. And when I go to deep sleep, there is IS, which is I3, which just doesn't know anything. So there is a super I, of which I1, I2, I3 are only different modes of existence in waking, dreaming, and deep sleep respectively. And that I doesn't participate in anything, just looks on. That is your real nature, is the I. So what dies? What dies is the little I, which is identified with the body and the mind and the senses. That is dying anyway during deep sleep. You don't cry and then you don't weep when the I goes away in deep sleep. Well, does anybody say, oh, I'm going to sleep, my eye is going away? You don't cry. You are so happy that your eye is going away because you don't feel pain anymore. You have underwent a surgical operation, very painful, and it's a terrible, unbearable pain. You call the doctor, doctor, I can't bear it anymore, please do something about it. Doctor comes, gives you a sedative, puts you to sleep, and you happily sleep away. Has the pain gone? Pain still is there of the body, but the feeler of the pain has been temporarily suspended by medicine. So if you can do it without medicine or with Vedantic medicine, the feeler of the pain was suspended. The person who feels the pain and the pleasure, big and small, great and enormous, this feeler, the eye has to be suspended. And when the eye is suspended, temporarily you feel some joy. If this is extended, the sleep experience is extended, minus the ignorance, then you're full blast of knowledge. Ignorance is bliss, they say. You can see it in sleep. When you don't understand something, you feel great joy. Sometimes we say, oh, the Swami spoke so well. Could you follow anything? I couldn't follow anything, but it's wonderful. So if you extend this, suspension of the eye becomes permanent. And ultimately, rather than suspending the eye, Vedanta says destroy it. It's called Naja. The eye, the little jiva is destroyed and nothing is gone. You realize yourself as that infinite self. So I'll end with a small story which Swami Vivekananda gave from the Mundaka Upanishad. Two birds of golden plumage sitting in the self-same tree, which is the human body, and one small bird at the lower level constantly keeps eating fruits, sweet and bitter, and the other bird is sitting at the top, not eating anything, not participating, simply looks on majestically. And when this small bird keeps on eating these fruits and is feeling happy and miserable by turns, according as it eats sweet fruits or bitter fruits, then when it ate a particularly bitter fruit, it became so terribly upset and dejected, looks up the bird, what a wonderful, majestic appearance of this bird. I wish I could be like that. He moves on towards that bird. Again forgets, as we normally do. So Vedanta holds so fine when the moment you become charged with this talk, the moment you go out to the street, everything is gone. That's because again and again you have to hear. What is the procedure? Listen again and again, till the conviction becomes so deep into you, the unshakable intellectual conviction of the truth of Vedanta that you are that higher self is called Paroksha Anubhuti. Paroksha means indirect experience. It becomes aparoksha, direct experience, when you actually realize yourself as the highest self. So our little bird is moving around. Who is the little bird? We, the Jivatma. It goes slightly nearer the higher bird, again forgets, starts eating the bitter and the sweet fruits. Once again it eats a very bitter fruit, some calamity, somebody deserts you, somebody gives you pain, and you did so much for that person, he betrays you. I did so much for him, and that fellow ditched me, I can't bear it anymore. Again you look at this bird, I wish I were that. Move on. Ultimately, when you keep on eating bitter and sweet fruits and moving on to the higher bird, then you come closest to that bird, the irradiation and the luminosity of the bird overwhelms you. Suddenly you realize, I am that bird. I was that bird all the time, and I forgot my true nature. I thought I'm a small little Jivatma moving around eating bitter and sweet fruits. I am that glorious self. And you escape the cycle of birth and death. You confront death through realization of your deathless nature. The art of dying is the art and science of realizing that you are deathless, immortal in your real nature. The Sanskrit is so beautiful. Swami Vivekananda used to chant in Sanskrit in a mellifluous voice, it is recorded, and then used to translate. I have given you the translation already. Let me chant this beautiful verse in Mundaka Upanishad, which Swami Vivekananda called the most poetical of the Upanishads, and end. Dva suparna sayuja sakhaya samanam vrikshum parishasvajate tayoranyah pippalam swadvatti anashnannanyo abhichakashiti. Samane vrikshe purusho nimagnaha anishaya shochiti muhyamanaha jushnai yada pashyatyanjamesham asya mahimanamiti vitashokaha. Vitashoka becomes completely free from sorrow. This is the key to the higher life which Vedanta is giving you, how to cross beyond sorrow. You may study any amount of books, you may listen to any amount of talks, you may do any amount of meditation. Nothing will be avail unless you realize your higher self as the immortal Nitya Shuddha Mukta Ananda Swarupa, it is called, Nitya eternal, Mukta free, and awakened Buddha, Shuddha pure. Shankara says Nitya has to be added with everything. Nitya Mukta, Nitya Shuddha, Nitya Buddha. You realize yourself and you go beyond sorrow. Tarati Shokam Atmavit. Chandogya Upanishad, the Rishi says, only a person who has realized his higher self goes beyond sorrow. And to go beyond the ocean of sorrow, which is death, is the purpose of human life. May we be blessed by realizing this truth in this very life. No post-mortem experience. Even when you are living in this body, and when you move out of this hall, every one of you should be feeling convinced about your higher real nature as a free, deathless. Thank you so much. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. May this verbal offering be given unto Sri Ramakrishna. Om that existence.